So I was wrong and the Doctor of Finance, Scott Turnbull, was right. Well, it's time for some straight talk, McClendon Chisholm. I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, and this is The Bunker Bob Show. Yes, it is true. I was wrong. Scott Turnbull was right, and I'm man enough to admit it. I really did think that the whole idea of a code enforcement officer was a ruse by the city council to distract attention away from the fact that they were considering giving $200,000 to a developer, an unscrupulous developer, in my opinion. And as it turns out, Scott called it. And what's clear is that, and let me be clear, as I don't want to give the misimpression that the council was all in lockstep, and I'm going to show you that they're not. But what was very apparent is that this was a truly was something real. This is something that the mayor really did want, and that he was being honest in his proposal. This is something that he believes in, and I understand why after discussing it with some citizens the other night. But I want to show you a little bit about show you a clip of the other night, and that was Tuesday night city council meeting, so that you can see for yourself what the mayor was proposing.
All right, moving on to 6.2, discussion and consideration regarding funding a new position for code enforcement officer / public works coordinator. I put this on there. Folks, I know that one of the things that we hear a lot about is, issues throughout all our neighborhoods, whether it's the signs that go up all over the place, or people doing some sort of solicitation, or, these guys, and I use this one because I see it off and on, selling the little bonsai trees on the side of the road. Things like that. Those are things with our city ordinances and a code enforcement person that we can help to slow that down. I'm not gonna tell you we're gonna stop it all, because that's, if I told you that would not be completely true. Just like, we have police in all these cities, but we're not stopping all the crime either. Code enforcement's not going to be able to stop everything, but it helps to start slowing it down and stopping it as we can. I think it's to a point now with the city where we need to look at a code enforcement position. The reason it listed in here / public works coordinator is, we may have the opportunity to have multiple jobs or multiple job things that individual can do along with the code enforcement. So that's why that was put on here.
Question? I think that this community is getting to a point where we're going to need some kind of code enforcement. Mm-hmm. Now, how many hours a week can we as a community devote to that? As Lorna was mentioning, I don't have that answered. So could we transition from Jim filling that role for a initial period of time, and then we, as the need arises and his roles expand with the fire department, maybe we change that. But I think that we need to definitely look into that as a council, and it needs to be on our radar in the near future.
I do agree that we do need we do need code enforcement. Probably not a complete full-time enforcer, maybe the part-time as you have listed here, but I would like to see how it would affect our budget and how sustainable it would be with what we're currently bringing into the city.
This is coming from almost 21 years experience.
This is the city attorney.
There is no middle ground on code enforcement. You either are all in or you are all out on code enforcement. You cannot dip your toe in the water and dally in. It is a commitment to code enforcement. It's a commitment to the citizens.
I think we're kind of in the middle of a rock and a hard place, because again, we have you know, we have a large subdivision in the middle of our community, and then it's surrounded by a more rural. So to think that we don't need some type of code enforcement, I think is a little concerning with the density within that neighborhood.
But it sounds as though what they're saying is that the city needs code enforcement. The problem with that rhetoric is that the city has code enforcement. In fact, the city council actually agreed to increase the fire chief's salary so that he could actually serve as code enforcement officer. As I said on the last show, when we hired Chief Simmons, he's a licensed peace officer. And at the time, the city administrator, Dave Butler, who was a former police officer, had been fulfilling that role as well. The reason is very simple, because there's not a lot of code enforcement work to do in our city. We are a very, very small city. You know, cities 5 times the size of ours, 10 times the size of ours, don't get a code enforcement officer until as much until their population size and until it becomes a real necessity. The fact is, if you have codes, you can enforce it. And there's a lot of ways that we enforce it. But I'm going to focus on that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want to continue, and I want you to see some of the other things that were said.
You know, and I hate to bring this development up because, you know, people have heard it through the years, good and bad. You know, Sonoma Verde would be a good example because construction is going on in there. You know, are things being enforced correctly or being enforced at all? You know, there are times I've gone out there and, you know, by Sonic and everything else, and you see all these billboards placed all over the place. You go to other cities and there's ordinance against that, you know, and you know, code enforcement's out there enforcing that. When they find out who put the signs out, you know, things can happen. There can be, you know, fines within that particular city. You know, there are different things that a code enforcement officer can do where, you know, the chief may not be able to do it at the same time frames where we may need a code enforcement officer doing it. Can he still do that? Yes, but I don't know that he's going to have the time to do it to the length we might need it done. So that's why I'm saying maybe we need to look at starting the ball rolling for a code enforcement individual.
Yeah, so if you've got to understand, a code enforcement officer is nothing more than someone who writes citations and files these citations and with the city. And bottom line, the next step is you have to go to court. So when you enforce your code, the court is who enforces these issues. So, for instance, if someone wants to challenge a citation, they would go to court. Okay, remember we talk about, and they're talking about just the fact that we're going to have one code enforcement officer. They don't take into consideration all of the other things that fall behind that. Chief Simmons is going to mention later, I'm going to show you a clip where he mentions how he's got some citations from when Dave Butler, our former city administrator and former code enforcement officer, was there. And the fact of the matter is that's because whenever you do something like that, it takes time to go through the court. I'm the president of our HOA. We are in the process of working with an attorney on an issue because if a homeowner doesn't want to comply with their covenants, with what they signed and agreed to do, the state of Texas has a litany of things that you have to go through. You have to jump through a bunch of hoops. And guess what? That's an HOA. A city has the same kind of hoops that they have to go through. And so it takes time. It takes years in some cases for something to be resolved. A code enforcement officer cannot take away your home. They cannot take away your property. They cannot arrest you. They can write a citation. And so this This hyperbole is just beyond the scope of reason. So let's continue. And folks, next is, this is a discussion between Mayor Short and Jim Bloom. Watch this.
I have one main question. I mean, we had talked about extending that opportunity for Chief Simmons, and is that a formal recognition that that is not something you want to do? I don't know if...
Well, my thought was,
Sorry.
My thought is that, if we put a code enforcement person out there with the additional duties, that they could spend more full-time job doing code enforcement. Whereas, obviously, the chief has got additional duties managing from a fire marshal standpoint and a full fire department. Is he going to be able to do as much code enforcement as we need?
As much code enforcement as we need. I have shared this quote that I have on my desk that I had on the dais of City Council from William Pitt. It's going to come up. There it is. Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. Whenever government officials and I'm going to explain why Keith Short is of the opinion that he is. And it's very, very simple. Keith Short is a government employee. He's always been a government employee. He came from the military, and now he's a peace officer. And this is someone who doesn't understand the private sector. Jim Bloom, on the other hand, came from the private sector, even though he's a fireman with another city now. He at least has the mindset that comes from the private sector. Government people who grow up and live in government, they don't understand. They can never see the forest for the trees. They don't understand. They don't understand these concepts of fiscal responsibility, because in government, if you need more money, you just tax more, and you just say, hey, government officials, they will find a way. The issue right now and what they're trying to drive is this idea, this backward thinking that it is a necessity. It's the plea of every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. This is not necessary. A full-time position, this is ludicrous. But here is what another government employee, the city attorney, here is his comments. Here's his advice to the city council in what he believes the city council should be doing.
This is coming from almost 21 years experience. There is no middle ground on code enforcement. You either are all in or you are all out on code enforcement. You cannot dip your toe in the water and dally in. It is a commitment to code enforcement. It's a commitment to the citizens that, hey, you know what, we're going to have things cleaned up.
Yeah. I don't know what that means. I don't know what he's talking about. You have to be all in or all out? What does that mean? You have to be all in or all out. Our city has codes that we have enforced. We have taken, when I was mayor, we took a citizen who was violating an ordinance. I don't know what I can say. I mean, I guess it's public record, but we had a citizen that was violating the code regarding livestock. I'll just put it simply. They had too much livestock on their little bitty plot of land, and it was ridiculous. Well, guess what? We took them to court. We won, and guess what? They still haven't resolved. They still haven't changed. It's the same problem. It's still the same problem. This is the nature of what code can do and what it cannot do. And so the city has to go through more processes. It's got to take the next step. But this is the way government works when you're talking about codes. Somehow, some way, Keith Short wants you to believe that if we have a code enforcement officer who goes around and polices our city, that it will clean up all of the signs and things like that, that we can actually find these people. Folks, go to Dallas, go to any city, Frisco, Addison, wherever you want to go, and look around, and you'll see these little signs that pop up. And you know what the cities do? They pull their hair out because they really can't do much about it except pull the signs up and throw them away. That's pretty much all they can do. But Keith Short, Nathan Hodges, who is completely lost on this issue. I'm going to share with you a video, a portion of what he said the other night. That's just going to, it boggles the mind when you hear him talk. I didn't realize how ignorant the former mayor of McLennan Chisholm, Nathan Hodges, is when it comes to code compliance. So here's another clip.
And one of the things is making sure that we get our ordinances up to speed, get them up to current standards, so that we have a little more enforcement power. Right now, I can go out and submit a letter, which I've done to people when it comes to high grass, more than 25 feet around the property, because that's all they're required to do, and who can comply.
And so when you say that you think that the ordinances need to be brought back up to date stuff, who would you suggest that position? A code enforcement person that's not there yet, or?
Well, I mean, having some input from somebody that has the experience in that field obviously would be good. I'm not a code enforcement officer. And, I haven't aspired to be a code enforcement officer, but I have no problem doing the job. I mean, it's getting.
I'm sorry, the audio is really terrible. Whenever someone talks, the mayor doesn't care if they're on mic, and so you really can't hear what they're saying. This happens all the time. So what Chief Simmons is arguing is that we need to bring our code up to compliance. Here is the fundamental problem with that false rhetoric. The fundamental problem with that is that when I was mayor, one of the reasons that we spent money on attorney fees was because we went through all of our ordinances. We wanted to make sure that they were where they needed to be, but we also hired a company for $2,500. This is how much it cost. For $2,500, they went through all of our ordinances, all of our code, to make sure that they were in compliance with the state law. Because every 2 years when the legislature meets, laws change. That's just the way it is. And so that there are obvious changes that happened since the last legislative session. For instance, you can no longer regulate what the facade of a business looks like. You can't say it has to be all stone. Thank you, legislature. Senator Bob Hall, guy that I have always supported, but I completely don't agree with that one. But these, you have to update the code, or you have to at least know the code to know that that's out of compliance with state law. So yes, the code needs to be brought up to compliance with state regs, but that's not hard to do. And what Chief Simmons is arguing is, well, this takes time. We've been going through it. He actually says, we've been going through it, but we keep getting stopped by other things that we're trying to focus on, and on and on and on and on. The fact of the matter is, we're not talking about a lot of work. The work has been done. In fact, when I was mayor, one of the things we did was we went and reviewed. We didn't just send it off to another company. We also read all of our ordinances. Every member of the city council, we had a different assignment, different section of the ordinance, and we went through to make sure that this is what we wanted. And the reason we did that is because in the code, it allowed tower companies to not have to go through planning and zoning and not have to go before a city council. All they had to do was get approval from the Board of Adjustment to get a waiver, a variance to allow them to go higher than the 180-foot maximum height of a structure. That's the only thing they had to do. I didn't figure that out. We didn't find that out until a tower company came in and basically tried to do that. Then When I stood up at a city council, at a board of adjustment meeting, since they couldn't come before planning and zoning, and since they couldn't come before city council, and since they never called me and said, hey, here's what we're trying to do, I stood up and said, this is ridiculous. The only thing that the law allows that a city to do, that a city council to do when they disagree with a board of adjustment decision, is take them to court. And I said, this is violating our city's, what the citizens of McLennan Chisholm care about. This is not okay. And so they took us to court when the Board of Adjustment made the right decision and denied their variance. Of course, we spent $65,000 litigating that tower dispute, and we won a $130,000 settlement. Of course, that's something that you'll never hear from William Dahl. Mr. Dahl, Councilman Dahl, has actually said that we spent $200,000. He said we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars litigating the tower dispute. He is a liar. The man doesn't know the truth of it. Slapped him in the face. But I digress. The fact of the matter is, our code, when we realized that code about the tower company was in place, and allowing tower companies to just circumvent the planning and zoning and the city council, I immediately asked the city attorney to draw up a new ordinance to require that they go before P&Z and a city council. And before we got to court or anything like that with that tower company, that ordinance was well in effect. See, that's why you review. And those ordinances had never been reviewed. Mike Donegan never reviewed the ordinances. Former mayor. Former mayor Gary Moody never reviewed the ordinances. Former mayor Nathan Hodges never reviewed the ordinances. We did. We wanted to make sure that they were in compliance with what the citizens want. How do we know what the citizens wanted? Well, very simple. We did this. We did a citizen survey. We did actually 2 of them. You can't find this on the city website anymore. They took it down. They don't want citizens to know about this survey. That's what happens. Tyrants, necessity. Now they're going to talk about necessity. It is the creed of slaves. It is the argument of tyrants. Necessity, necessity, necessity. Now, so here, that's where we are now. There is a ray of sunshine that came into city council that even, and as I have said time and again, when people act conservatively, I will applaud them. I will take note of that, and I will talk about that. So those of you who think that I have nothing good to say about members of city council, that's simply not true. I just don't like leftists, and leftists do very few things right. But I will say, what you're about to see from Jim Bloom gave me a little bit of I became a little more enthusiastic about what Mr. Bloom is doing on city council. Watch this.
Since this was a little bit unexpected, we really haven't gotten a chance to hear from citizens a lot on this. And my suspicion is that since taxes and expenditures are always an issue, and people like the country feel, and they don't want a lot of city services, that I don't know that this is something I don't feel like this is where we jump off right now. I know code enforcement is an issue, but that's part of what if anyone who's really lived in the country, they know what it's like. And, if we want to keep city government small, which really comes down to employees, I have concerns about this.
Wow. Thank you, Mayor-Pro-Tem Jim Bloom. I am interested to know how it is that he knows what citizens want. And the only way he can speak definitively about it is he had to have something empirical to reference. This is the only place that Jim Bloom could reference that the citizens don't want this. The citizens want limited government. They want lower taxes. And Jim Bloom's right. The only way you limit government is employees. In a city like ours, well, obviously, thanks to Mayor Moody and Steve Hatfield and And Jack Pullen, we've got a city hall that put us in a debt for $2.125 million for a 5,000 square foot facility. But I'm not going to stop there, because it's not just Jim Bloom who had some good things to say. Here's something that Lorna Kipphut had to say.
Mr. Mayor, I was just thinking we made a pretty big jump from having Chief Simmons do it, to start off, to see, and then to jump all the way to a full-time seems to me to be a bit premature. I would rather get some metrics done to see what the need is versus going right full steam ahead with a full-time position. And if we see, as it's in the staff report, that the chief has got more responsibilities with the creation of the new fire department and getting everything squared away there, I can understand that. But I would rather have viable, trackable metrics to see what is really needed before we hire additional personnel.
We're not saying it has to be 100% 40-hour job.
Right, I know there was alternate, but I even see that as a need, because if we do hire a part-time code enforcement officer, we're going to need to get a vehicle for the individual, so that's an added cost. It's just something that we didn't really even talk about this past year during the budget cycle. And yes, we do have the option to be flexible in that, I understand it, but I would really like to look at the metrics. And since we don't have anything right now, I would like to gradually go towards what our requirement might be. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good thing, getting some empirical evidence, some matrix together. I'm not sure that I would agree with Mrs. Kipphut's solution on that. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'll show you another clip. But I have to say, I appreciate Mrs. Kipphut being thoughtful in understanding how important it is to get real data to support that. But it doesn't stop with Mrs. Kipphut. Guess what? Trudy Woesner, and again, I may not be saying her last name correctly, and believe it or not, I am not saying misspeaking her last name on purpose. I don't know. I heard someone say Woesner or Woesner at the council meeting. I don't know how she says her name. So maybe Mrs. Woesner, when you're at city council next time, just shout out, just say, hey, by the way you say my name is this. And I'll start saying it correctly if I'm saying it wrong. But Mrs. Woesner, so far as I know, here is something that she had to say that I thought was really good.
Mayor?
Yes.
So we started out with how many employees about a year ago?
Started what?
How many employees did we have about a year ago?
Yeah, maybe.
So now what are we going to be looking at? How many more employees? No, how many more employees?
If you add the code enforcement, it would be one.
Plus a secretary, an administration person, a part-time person. I think we're tacking on a little more than we need to right now.
Okay.
I love it. Trudy, good job. That's something that the citizens should be proud of you saying. Of course, Mayor Short is short on facts. He says, well, we are only hiring one person this year. And she's saying, wait a minute. We just approved a city secretary, a city another administrator, a part-time administrative assistant. This is not a good thing. And God bless her. God bless Jim Bloom. God bless Lorna Kipphut, standing up for citizens, standing up for our tax rate. We don't need more government employees. I promise you this. If our city gets a code enforcement officer, full-time or part-time, you will see no difference in the quality of life here in McClendon-Chisholm. That is an absolute guarantee. No difference. But it will sure as heck, you will feel it in the pocketbook because of what's coming up down the pike next year, next budget session. Folks, get ready. Here is a great exchange between Lorna Kipphut, Nathan Hodges, Keith Short, and Trudy Woesner.
There's a lot of other neighborhoods though that have
That's Lorna
HOA guidelines that keep those things in check. Sonoma Verde is growing. It doesn't have a HOA yet.
But some of us don't have an HOA.
Here's the thing, it doesn't matter if it's an HOA or not. There are certain city ordinances that have to be followed no matter what area you're in. And those are enforced through code enforcement.
Right. But
I guess I'm just having an issue with, I thought this was already decided on. So that's where I'm at, is I thought we'd already made this decision, and now it's coming back at us. And I don't feel like today's the day to make that decision because I thought it had already been done.
We can table it for another meeting.
Okay.
Gets a little bit better. This next clip, you're going to love it. I just wanted to correct Mrs. Kipphut on one thing. She didn't mean to say what she did. It's just that Sonoma Verde does have an HOA. It does have a homeowners association. It's completely under the control of the developer. So another thing to remember is that the code enforcement, for instance, when I was mayor, I believe it was Adrian Balcom who proposed an ordinance that required construction time to be between certain hours, not on holidays, things like that. We didn't have an ordinance like that before, and so nothing could be done. Now, if they are continuing to do construction after hours, guess what? You don't need a code enforcement officer out there. You can call the sheriff because it's a law. It is an ordinance is a law, by the way. Didn't know if you knew that, but the sheriff can enforce that law. So can the district attorney. So there are things that can be done that you don't need a code enforcement officer for. But I do want to highlight the fact that most HOAs, and I realize Nathan Hodges is not part of an HOA. He is so angry about where he lives. Do you know Nathan Hodges has had his house up for sale? He had his house up for sale an entire year, and when they asked him, we're going to appoint him to city council, he took his house off the market. This is a guy who was going to leave the city of McLennan-Chisholm. Now he's back on city council. So Nathan Hodges has no integrity in this whole issue, in my opinion. So he's arguing that, well, there's a lot of homes that don't have HOAs and they need code enforcement. You can still get code enforcement. You can ask the city to send a fine, to send a letter. There are a lot of things you can do, but I guarantee you this, more policing does not make for a happier and a better community. It actually does exactly the opposite. But for someone who has a government mindset like Keith Short, I mean, this is a guy who he's always been in government. He doesn't know any other way. He doesn't make sense. He is so dejected. Watch this clip. This is a guy who is licking his wounds. He is so upset right now. Just watch this for yourself.
What we were also looking at when it says in there the way it's written, /public works coordinator is taking on additional duties that we're already paying outside for. Just so you know. There's also going to be a public works coordinator. What is he talking about? If you didn't see the last show, let me show you. It says that this position would absorb the lawn care and janitorial services, therefore reducing the financial impact by $12,000. This individual is going to be a code enforcement officer. They're going to mow the lawn. They're going to be a lawn care professional. They're also going to be a housekeeper for the city of McLennan-Chisholm. But the problem is, and I highlighted this on the last show, the problem is that we currently pay nothing for janitorial services. There's nothing in the budget. So while they're creating this rhetoric that says, hey, we're going to be saving all this money, the reality of it is that's just not true. We're not paying anything right now. I do have an idea that is not my own, and I'm not going to share who said it because I'm not sure they would want me to. But I think it's an amazing idea. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, and how you do all of these things without having to spend any more money as a city. But see, the problem is you've got to get out of the government mindset that Keith Short has, that Keith Short lives in, that the city attorney lives in. The city attorney has been a city attorney for over 21 years, or almost 21 years is what he says.
This guy is institutionalized. These people have have government on the brain. Here's another thing you got to see. This is the city attorney, and just listen for yourself.
Might I chime in just for a second, Mayor? I think it's a very sagacious approach to the whole issue to decide what exactly that you want and what exactly that you need before you do anything. I think that's exceptionally wise. The reason why is this coming from almost 21 years experience. There is no middle ground on code enforcement.
There is no middle ground on code enforcement. That comment is going to bite him in the tail end in a minute. But the answer is I didn't know what sagacious meant either. So I looked it up, and it means having or showing acute acumen, discernment, and keen practical sense. It's shrewd. So there's a word to describe those who use this word to describe what their six bosses are doing. But unfortunately, I can't remember the word that I'm looking for. But as you heard the city attorney, he was very, very complimentary of the fact that the city council is taking such thoughtful steps in really making sure that this is the right thing for the community and deliberating, deciding whether or not they want to do this, whether or not they want to have code enforcement. Man, boy, I sure feel better when an attorney tells me how great I am. So, but here, remember, the city attorney says if you do code enforcement, if you're gonna enforce the code, you got to be all in or all out. I mean, it's not halfway. He said that. That was the second clip that I showed you. Here's a third clip. Here's an additional thing that he has to say.
But once you decide on it, you have to go with it, because it's not going to work if we're trying to change things here or change things here, do it different in this situation or do it different in that situation. That's going to cause a mess. So we either don't do it at all, or we go for, now going full forward too. Don't forget, it can be part-time. We can say, hey, look, we're full force in, but we're at a code enforcement officer, we're going to pay 25 hours a week. I'm throwing that out there. 25 hours a week. Now, whatever they can get done in the 20, that's a full-time, that's a all in on code enforcement. It doesn't mean whatever investment you make, whether it's a small one or a big one, needs to be all in if you're going to make that investment. But again, it doesn't mean that it has to be a big investment in it. So I want to just encourage the council. I think this is the proper path to go down. I think it's the wise path to decide, hey, how do we want to handle this before we start handling it?
How do we want to handle it before we start handling it? I mean, golly. This is what you call, this is what you pay for, though. I mean, you want your attorney to tell you how great you are, how smart you are. And I love the way he says you got to go all in. It's either all in or all out. But if you want to do part-time, that's okay, because that's all in too. But this is the advice that our city attorney is giving this city council. We're paying for this, folks. You're paying for it. What are you going to do? All in, but part-time is fine. Here's Chief Simmons. Okay, so Chief Simmons, remember, he's trying to get another person on staff. Here's the thing, in the report that they're proposing, this person would answer to the city administrator? No, they would answer to Chief Simmons. He gets another person to tell him what to do. Here's what Chief Simmons said. I hope we can hear this, and goodness knows, I know the sound is not good on these.
There's 4 cases sitting right now on certain issues with junk yards and things like that.
Yeah,
I am working,
it's been going
but at a very
Nice.
slow pace. And one reason is that our ordinances are so out of whack. I'm contacting people that I do know that are going for it and saying, hey, can you give me some direction? I have no problem continue to do it. Don't have an issue with it at all. I'm actually in school this week, as you said, going through this code enforcement class. It's an adventure. But there are cases out there, and there's about 4 of them right now, and they're sitting on my desk, and I do put some time into it, but it's not a full-time gig. I do it on a very part-time basis.
Yeah, so I hope you heard all of that. This is something that Chief Simmons, you understand, the city is paying for him to be trained as a code enforcement officer. Last December, the city council voted to make him code enforcement officer. They gave him an additional salary or a bump in his salary so that he could fulfill this job, which is not much. There's not much to do in code enforcement. Let me say it again. There's not much to do in code enforcement. But remember, if you're a bureaucrat, you have to show your value. Now, this is going to prove to you, this is going to show how government officials think. This is what I call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Listen to what Trudy Woesner asked. Good question again, Trudy. You're doing great. Keep it up. And listen to how Chief Simmons answers it.
But don't you think that too, once you do attack some of these, you won't need to, it'll be all dwindled down, you know what I'm saying?
As I learned in this class, you attack one and another one pops up, you attack one and another one pops up. So you're never going to get a hold of it where you have zero code enforcement issues. Wait till springtime comes back and I'll have 15, 20 calls of people complaining about high grass at an intersection or high grass in a open lot area of city hall property around these neighborhoods. So it never goes away.
Yeah, so it never goes away, and Chief Simmons will make sure of that if he's code enforcement officer. It will never go away. Trudy's asking a pretty simple question. If you attack some of these things, doesn't that lessen your workload? Well, of course it does. But Chief Simmons is going to say, and if you notice, who was nodding their head? It was Nathan Hodges and Keith Short, both nodding their head. Oh, yes. Now, ironically, Nathan Hodges comes from the private sector, but Nathan Hodges is a big government liberal. What do you expect? What do you expect? So this is, Chief Simmons wants to make sure that you understand that these things will never go away. So please understand, hey, this is just a big, big job. He wants another bureaucrat under him. Here's the question. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste of what I found, because as I alluded to, or as I spoke about on the last show, I have done a comprehensive review of the last 7 years of fire calls to the MCVFD and the MCFD, now that it's part of the city. And I have been going through this to demonstrate conclusively that what the city council is trying to perpetuate is not true, that more calls are going inside the city than outside the city. Let me just show you a few of the slides that I'll be showing. I'll be doing a whole show just on this issue, because I continue to bang the drum, as I did when I was councilman, as I did when I was mayor, as I continue to do, that those who are in the unincorporated area of our fire district are serviced by our city, and they contribute nothing to their fire protection service. The question that I have is, why are we not charging them for service? Let me just show you what you'll see in that show. Annual call totals inside versus outside MCVFD fire districts. The orange is outside the fire district. The blue is inside the fire district. If you look what's circled 2018, 2019, this is the last fiscal year. There are 237 calls outside the fire district, outside of the city of McLennan-Chisholm, and 193 fire calls inside the city of McLennan-Chisholm. Fire-related calls, when you just focus on that, we had 65 fire-related calls. That's grass fires, mutual aid. I'm going to show you. I'm going to break it down in just a second. But there's 65 outside, 13 inside of the city. This is structure fires. We had 2 structure fires inside the city, 9 outside the city. And by the way, the reason there's only 2 bars on that is because Rockwall County Dispatch began breaking down fire call type when the new countywide dispatch system was installed during the reporting year 2016-17. So that's when they started showing those. So that's why you only see that bar graph. But when you go to vehicle fires, we had 1 inside and 1 outside of the city of McLennan-Chisholm last year. Going to grass fires, you had 15 outside, one inside the city limits. When you look at smoke investigation, we had 10 outside, 5 inside the city. When we talk about other calls, which there were 23 outside, 4 inside. When you look at mutual aid calls, there were 7 outside the city limits and 0 inside. That's why it's called mutual aid. Motor vehicle accidents, this is where we see more inside the city than outside. But if you remember, you got to realize most of these motor vehicle accidents are on State Highway 205. Some of them are inside the city and some of them are out. But most of the people who are serviced in these motor vehicle accidents are not citizens of McLennan Chisholm. They come from outside the city of McLennan Chisholm. When you look at medical calls, this is where the bulk of the MC Fire Department and MC VFD has always spent their time. And that is 89 outside the city, 75 inside the city. And here's the thing. If you stop servicing medical calls outside of the city limits of McLennan Chisholm, that would be a good start. We don't even need to service medical calls inside the city, but the citizens, us taxpayers, we're paying for it. So while it's not necessary at all for the fire department to service, and the reason I'm showing you this, by the way, I just realized I didn't explain. I'm trying to show you that Chief Simmons' job is not that hard, especially since he has an assistant fire chief, and especially since we have 4 full-time firefighters. When we're talking about the amount of time that he has to spend on the fire department, we're not talking about a lot of work here. We're not talking about a lot of calls. Of course, people are offended by that. I'm breaking a rule by criticizing the fire department, but I'm not criticizing the fire department. I'm criticizing the bureaucrat that runs the fire department, Jim Simmons, because this is what I'm seeing. So these are the medical calls. Now, if we look at medical calls versus fire-related calls, and these are the last 2 years, fiscal years on the medical side. If you look at 2017 and 2018, you can see that medical calls far exceed fire calls. Same thing if you go to the 2018, 2019. And so anyone who tells you that there's more calls going out inside the city than outside, they're lying to you. Let's look at, this is other calls. This is all the other kind of calls that the city, that the McLennan Chisholm Fire Department gets, from animal complaints all the way to welfare checks. Look, a lot of these are nonsense, what I consider nonsense calls. But we go on them. Here, you want to see a real nonsense call? This is one that is not in this chart at all, and that is vehicle unlocks. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. The fire department responds when someone has locked their keys out of their car, and almost equal in proportion. The reason why you saw that 7 and 8 in 2016, 17, with the inside the city limits is because former Chief Jones, had the fire department sit at the Shell station and talk to people about calling in a vehicle unlock call so that they could count that call as being inside the city limits of McLennan Chisholm, because I was barking at them about saying, look at all the calls outside the city. Chief Jones actually said at a city council meeting, I guarantee you that next year you will see more calls inside the city than outside the city. It didn't happen, but they sure tried. And this is the kind of nonsense that happens with that corrupt fire department, with a corrupt Robert Jones. That's what I was dealing with as mayor. I was willing to stand up to them. I don't have the mentality that Keith Short has as it relates to what the role of government is. My belief in the role of government is that government should be limited, and I love the fact that Jim Bloom kind of spoke about that too. Here's Trudy Woesner. I want to give you another clip from the city council meeting that I think is a good one. This is Trudy Woesner asking Chief Simmons, who was it that handled the code compliance before he did.
Who sort of did it before? I mean, I'm using the word sorta did it before.
Dave Butler did it when he was here. He was a certified code officer.
And what was his position?
He was city administrator.
It was similar to what we're kind of talking about now. He would kind of do it on an as-needed basis.
I still have some cases from when he was in office. Not nothing against Dave Butler at all, didn't say that. But we still have some cases that we're working on when he was in office.
Oh, yeah, he's not trying to criticize Dave Butler by saying that he still has cases that were Dave Butler's when he was here. The problem, what Chief Simmons is not saying to you is these are open cases that continue because the law does not allow you, the city of McLennan Chisholm, to just go in and force people to do things that if they don't want to do it. And so that's the problem. That's why you have rhetoric. This is all rhetoric from the fire chief, from the mayor, the city attorney, all of these people, all of these big government liberals, all of these people with big government mindsets. That's the only thing that they can think about is how to sustain themselves. A bureaucracy's primary goal, as Ronald Reagan said, is to preserve itself. And that's what's happening here. Now, this is the, and one of the things I didn't finish saying was that when we hired Chief Simmons, he was a licensed peace officer. I talked about Dave Butler, how he was a police officer. And when because we knew that Dave was going to retire. And so when we were talking to him, we asked him, I said, would you be willing to do code enforcement? He goes, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer. I said, there's really not much to it because we really don't have that many issues. They're either a real big issue or they're not a big issue. And by the way, if grass is high, a city can require someone to mow their grass. And if they don't mow their grass, they can hire a company to come in and mow it for them and then charge the citizen what the city paid. So that's so let me think. Who is it that's mowing the grass? Oh, it's the code enforcement officer. Hey, there's some extra money, I guess, for you. That's what they're proposing. Remember, that's what they're proposing. Okay, so only a couple more clips here, and this one is where, again, I'm not holding Lorna Kipphut. I understand what she's saying here. I just don't agree with it, and I'm going to explain why. But listen to what she says because I want to give her opportunity to talk about it.
I would like to see, once Chief's just now getting qualified and getting certified, I'd like to see what the workload is. I mean, I think the person that's going to be able to help us answer this question is Chief because he's going to be doing the work. And if he decides, yep.
No, Lorna, no. The best person to determine is not Chief Simmons. And there's a reason why. When I asked, I did an open records request for all of the call data for the from the Rockwall County Dispatch, and I also asked the same. I did all of my analysis with that data. Then I went to the city and I asked for the same information, and the information that I got back from, and then I compared what the Rockwall County Dispatch information showed, what Chief Simmons sent me in data, and what Chief Simmons reported to City Council. And there's anomalies in there that make for a lot of concern from my side. Now, Chief Simmons has reached out to me and asked if I could answer or explain to him or highlight where the discrepancies are, and I'm putting together a report for him so that he can look at it and give me a report back and help me understand where I am maybe missing something. But the problem is, regardless, there are three kinds of reports. I've also taken the report that he gives to City Council, and I'm looking at the data that he gives to me, which, where does it come from? It comes from a Rockwall County Rockwall County Dispatch. So there's something missing in the reports that is being given to City Council. It appears that's what I'm seeing, and so I'll share that on that show. But who's holding Chief Simmons accountable? I know that the mayor is supposed to be doing that, but that's not happening. So don't ask Chief Simmons for the data, for the matrix. No, find a different way to get the matrices that you're looking for. Let's look at one more video.
Well, I agree with Jim. I think we will, maybe give some time to let us hear from what the citizens maybe have a better solution than what we're thinking right now. So,
yeah, I agree. Hear from citizens. How are you going to hear from citizens? You guys have already said that city surveys are a waste of time. How are you going to do it? Through a town hall meeting? A town hall meeting where you get the same blowhards, the Mike Donegans. Good gracious, Mike Donegan, he loves himself a town hall meeting because then he can stand up at a town hall meeting and he can wax prolific and make everyone think that he's really smart. That's why he likes town hall meetings, because he gets the chance to be the center of attention. Town hall meetings are a joke. They accomplish nothing. You hear from maybe 8 or 10 people, maybe. So you're not going to get that from a town hall meeting. Do you want citizens to come up and do you want them to speak at city council meetings? Because most of us have other things going on. My daughter has soccer practice on Tuesdays. My daughter comes first. I spent my time at city council. I missed a lot of those things, but I'm not going to miss them now, and unless I absolutely have to. But this is the problem here. How are you going to find what citizens want? You should know what citizens want. You already know what citizens want. And by the way, Jim Bloom has already said what citizens want. They want to be left alone. They want to live in peace. They want a more rural lifestyle. We are not a big city. We are not Heath. We're not Royce City. We are McLean and Chisholm. Why isn't that okay? Oh no, not for those with a government mindset. Okay, so I told you that I would share with you what my idea about how to bring this thing to fruition. This is an idea that is not mine, but when I heard it, I was like, man, that is a great idea. Our city, you saw how many calls that we have per day for the McLean and Chisholm Fire Department. The fire station is about to be built next to City Hall. Every fire department that I have ever heard of, those men, they take care of that fire department. They cook, they clean those fire departments, their buildings. They clean the facilities. They make sure that everything is tip top. Guess what? We're talking about a fire department that if you take away medical calls, we're far less than one call per day. Can they clean City Hall? They could if they had a desire as public servants. If their mindset was, I'm here to serve. But a lot of people say, well, that's just beneath them. Why is that beneath them? When I was mayor, I cleaned the toilets if I saw them dirty. I realize we have a very different mindset. So that's one way we can do it. You don't need, and the other thing is you have a fire chief who has a licensed peace officer. But guess what? We also have a mayor who is a licensed peace officer. Did you know that the code enforcement is the job of the mayor? It's by statute, unless the city council chooses to hand that position to someone else. Mayor Short could do it. He's a peace officer. But the problem is Mayor Short is an absent, he's an empty suit. He is an absent mayor. He comes to meetings, he goes to the little special events where he can be funny and wax prolific. But he is not a mayor who thinks outside the box. He's not someone who thinks about how do we, if we're going to try to keep our community small, if we're going to keep our our government limited, what are some creative ways that we can do this? Can't we work with the fire? We have two full employees. We have two firefighters that are there 24/7. Can they not mow? Why can't they mow? They mow the fire station. Every city that has a fire station, they mow the fire station. And since it's going to be right next door to City Hall, if we're going to buy a riding lawnmower, heck, why can't they mow that lawn? Is there a code against that? Do we need a code enforcement officer to keep them from doing that? Look, folks, if you're offended by what I just said, don't email me because I don't care. I don't care, nor should you. We are paying firefighters to sit and do nothing. They are ready. And by the way, folks, you saw how many structure fires we have inside the city and outside the city. How much experience do our firefighters really have? Not much. Not much when it comes to a house fire, for sure. A rookie firefighter with the city of Dallas in 6 months has more experience than the fire chief of the McLennan-Chisholm Volunteer Fire Department, Robert Jones, had. That should tell you something about how we are just underutilizing resources, people. And the other thing is we're making an assumption that they don't want to do it or are not willing to do it. I have known a lot of firefighters in my life. And most of them I have a very good relationship with. The only ones that I have not had is the former fire chief, former treasurer of the McLennan-Chisholm Volunteer Fire Department. What I know about most firefighters is that they are good people and that they believe in helping where they can, and they'll do anything. They'll paint. They'll do those little maintenance things that the city administrator listed off in that thing. Watch the last show if you don't know what I'm talking about. And we could save a heck of a lot of money. Oh, and by the way, we wouldn't have to buy another car either if Chief Simmons would just do his job, which is being a fire chief and a code enforcement officer. And we're not talking about a lot of work, folks. I'd like to see major. You know what? I don't know if you realize how much time I put into going through this information. But when I was mayor, this is the kind of work I put into being mayor. Keith Short does not put any time, none. Our government is run by the city administrator, and why? Because she is filling a vacuum. And when the city administrator goes for training, she goes to these municipal league conferences. I went to one when I was mayor, and I went to those seminars, and I realized really quickly when I went to the seminars and when I heard the mindset of the Texas Municipal League, I realized this is not consistent with the values of McLennan-Chisholm. They're all talking about how do you boost revenue, boost taxes, increase the ability to grow. And so when you send the city administrator to these conferences, this is what she's hearing. And she's getting no feedback. She's getting no pushback from the mayor or city council who are saying, wait a minute, we really do need to think about trying to limit the size and scope of our government. We don't want to be big. We need to think of other solutions. But bless her heart, Lisa Paloma, I'm talking about the city administrator. She's not out there just trying to grow our government. She's doing what she knows because we don't have a mayor who is leading. And what else do you expect to have happen? This is what happens when we lack leadership. I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic that Keith Short was a Marine and served our country honorably. I think it's great. I've never, ever, ever looked down upon or said anything negative about anyone who served. I've always honored those people. My point is, that's great that he did that, but we're not seeing that kind of leadership out of Keith Short now. So this is what we get. More government, bigger government, bigger government, bigger government. As a mayor, since he loves to talk about how he's the CEO of the city, hey man, bigger government, that's better for him, right? So look, there are some solutions that we could take that if the city council had the ability to just say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Why are we fighting with our city employees? Chief Simmons lied to me when I was mayor. He lied to me outright when he said, "Oh, he could take on this role, that we didn't need a ladder truck. Now we need a ladder truck. Apparently, that he would get volunteers, hire people from other cities that were." Since all cities, they work 1 day on, 2 days off. So use one of the, bring in these kinds of firefighters who on one of their days off to work for the city, as opposed to having full-time firefighters where we have to pay health care, that don't have the experience, that we have to pay for training. Let the other cities pay for the training. Let the other cities give them the experience. They come here. Chief Simmons completely abandoned that. Chief Simmons I'm very disappointed. I'll just put it that way. So that's the code enforcement officer issue, and it's not over. They have pushed back the vote, as you saw Mayor Short pouting about it, pushing it back at least a month so that they can get the matrix from Chief Simmons, which I think is going to tell them nothing. It is going to be a bunch of fluff, in my opinion. So the other thing I realized that a lot of people are wondering, well, what happened with the development, the $200,000? They also pushed that back. But I am going to be doing a show on Monday. I'm going to be focusing on what's going to be happening Monday afternoon. Because guess what? The Economic Development Committee is meeting at City Hall on Monday afternoon. And guess who's going to be there? I will be there. And I'm also going to broadcast live from there. That's what I plan to do. I hope it's Martin Luther King Day. So, but I plan to do that. So I hope I can. And but I will do a show that morning and kind of update you on that issue. So it's been a long week, and getting this show put together was a bigger task than I had expected it to be because of all of the stuff that I had to look into. But I hope that this was informative for you, and I hope that you will at least reach out to the city council. And forget the mayor. Reach out to the city council members, Jim Bloom, Trudy Woesner, and Lorna Kipphut, and urge them to stand up for you. Tell them do not compromise. If you do that, I guarantee you they will listen. I believe that they will listen. But if you don't, please tell your neighbors. Send them a link to this show so that they understand what's happening, so that they can be informed too. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And I hope that in the meantime, we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. I'm Bunker Bob. We'll see you next time.